Hey everyone, it's Cody. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video. I've been seeing a lot of conflicting information out there about how the housing market today varies and how it's actually very similar to the market that we saw back in 2007, 2008, 2009 when we went through the last housing crash. I'm actually going to talk about some of the differences that we're seeing in the market and why this market is very different from what we saw, roughly 15 years ago. There's a lot of different things you want to know about. I'm going to be covering about 5 or 6 different things that are extremely different, and I think you're going to find a lot of value in this. And make sure to stick around all the way till later in the video. We're actually going to talk about 2 different things on why the housing market is so different than it was 15 years ago. And I know I'm going to get a lot of comments about this. It's going to be very controversial, and I think a lot of people have strong opinions about this, and I'd love to hear what you think. So again, as we jump into this, my name's Cody Steck, your favorite Utah realtor. If you're thinking about buying or selling real estate here in Utah, I would love to help you. My team and I have helped hundreds of people from all across the nation and even right here in our own backyard buy and sell real estate, and we'd love to help you do the same. My information is here on the screen. Call, text, or email anytime. And with that said, let's go ahead and jump into this. So number 1 on our list, we're going to talk a little bit about how mortgages and lending practices are actually very different today than they were 15 to 20 years ago. Back in the early 2000s and even into the mid 2000s, we used to see a lot of mortgages that would be just absolutely crazy terms, right? You would be able to get terms where you could basically walk into the bank and say, hey, I make $600,000 per year and I have no debt, and banks would actually give you a loan based off of that, right? There was no income, no docs, no credit check. It was basically just the Wild West out there, and banks would give loans to just about anybody who wanted one. I mean, you heard of, there's stories out there where you'd have like a cashier at a grocery store or something who has 3 or 4 loans to their name and they're making $12 an hour, right? These are the types of differences that you see in the market right now. There's absolutely no way that you could get a loan like that. The banks and their lending practices that we see today are extremely tight. They go through and they check everything with a fine-tooth comb. They're going to want to know how much money you made, how much debt you have, why you have a payment of $43.27 going out to Aunt Susie every month. They want to know everything along the way, and they're extremely strict about it. So there's no more of these crazy lending practices. They actually used to call some of those loans ninja loans because it was no income, no job, no assets. And that was the types of loans that they were giving out, right? They basically said, hey, if anybody wants a loan, we'll give one to you. And the banks were allowing this because the commission, well, it's really the lenders, the commission brokers, the mortgage brokers were making huge commissions on each of these loans. And so they're basically just dishing them out to anybody who would take one. And there was a lot of speculation going on in the market. So that's one thing that's actually happened that is much different that we've seen so far, is that the mortgages and the way that they actually lend money is now way more strict. So anybody who's gotten a loan in the last 10 to 15 years actually has probably done so based off of very secure, safe lending practices. Next up, I also want to talk about the job market. The job market right now is extremely different than what we saw back in 2007, 2008, and even going into 2009. During that time, we saw unemployment jump up drastically. We saw unemployment reach somewhere between 8 to 10%, depending on the market you were in. Some markets were even as high as 15% unemployment, which is kind of crazy. When you think about that, that means that roughly 85 out of 100 people did have a job, but 15 people out of that 100 did actually end up losing their job. So we saw massive amounts of unemployment, which is way higher than what it usually is. Now, with that being said, I do think that we will see unemployment actually tick up here in 2023. But as of right now, the job market is extremely secure. As a nation, we're sitting at about the low 3% range on unemployment. And of course, during the last housing crash in 2007, unemployment was also very low, but then began to climb into 2008 and 2009. And that's where we saw it hit that 8 to 10% range. So yes, I do think that there could be a rise in unemployment over the next, 2023, 2024. But as of right now, it's still extremely low, and it looks like it's going to stay that way, right? There's still a ton of jobs being created. There's still a lot of businesses out there who have a shortage of employees. So even though you're hearing about some of these top level companies like Apple or Facebook or Disney or whoever laying off these people, right? Those people are going to trickle down. They're going to get the next, the next job on the tier. And then the people who would be applying for that second tier job are going to have to move to the third tier, and it's going to trickle all the way down to the very basic entry level jobs. That's at least my own opinion. So I do think that we'll actually see very strong employment as long as things don't change drastically, which of course they always can, but as long as we don't see them change drastically, I do think that we'll probably see unemployment remain low. Now, if obviously that does climb up, if we start to see 6, 7, 8% or more unemployment, then this point kind of goes out the window. But at this point in time, unemployment is low, and that's drastically different than than what we saw 15 years ago. The next thing I have to talk about here is the housing shortage that we currently have. Back in 2005, 2006, 2007, some of the markets that were out there were seeing massive amounts of speculation, and they were building way more homes than we actually needed. Builders were just going crazy. They were building anything that they could because during that run up from the early 2000s to about 2007, builders knew that whatever they built, somebody would buy it, right? There was people buying 2, 3, 4 homes at a time and just completely speculating on that they'd be able to purchase it at that time for, let's say, $300,000 and then be able to sell it in a year or 2 years for $400,000, right? People were using this as a speculative investment, and that's what actually caused builders to just basically say, well, we have buyers, let's just go for it. Let's just start building stuff and see, when the buyers come, we'll sell it to them and make a lot of money along the way, right? That has actually drastically changed, especially here in Salt Lake City. We're seeing a massive change with this because now there's a housing shortage. They actually estimate that we're about 30,000 housing units short here in Utah for the entire state, right? So that means that there's 30,000 potential families or couples or even individuals who do not have a place to live, and they're currently, staying with family. They're currently renting a basement. They might be living with extended family. They might be renting a hotel. These are people who do not have a long-term place to stay, and that's the estimate here. They're saying 30,000 housing units. If we compare that back to 2005 to 2008, you're going to see a huge difference. If you go back and look at the inventory levels at that time, there was tons of vacant homes and tons of homes being built, and there was an oversupply in the market. Another thing that's worth mentioning when it comes to this housing shortage is that you actually have a lot of homeowners out there who would be considering making a move, either because they want a bigger home, a smaller home, or they just want to move across town. But unfortunately, they're not able to do so, right? Because they bought their home, let's say 5 years ago, and they're now sitting on a lot of equity, but they've also got a very low interest rate. They might be at a 2, 3, 4% interest rate, but they know that if they sell their home and go buy something new, they're going to have to lock in at somewhere between 6 and 7% interest rate, and they don't want to do this, right? So those homeowners are actually choosing not to sell, which is reducing the amount of inventory that we're seeing on the market, and that's actually helping to keep prices inflated. Now, if that inventory does increase substantially, you're going to start having sellers, start to compete against each other, and we're going to see, it's going to be a race to the bottom on who can price their home low enough to get it sold, and that's what you're going to end up seeing. You're going to see a lot of sellers come to the market, and then you'll see prices drop pretty rapidly after that. That's what could happen anyway. So that being said, there is a housing shortage right now. As of today, we have about 7,000 active listings on our market, and that's not very much, right? That's obviously up from the 2,000 to 3,000 that we saw back in January of 2022 when it was at its all-time low, but that's still well below the roughly 10,000 to 12,000 that we saw, in years past when inventory levels were actually much higher. Going through much of the 2013 to 2018 market, we did see inventory at much higher levels than what we're seeing today. So there is a shortage, whether people want to believe it or not. We're just not seeing as many homes on the market, and that's actually helping to keep prices inflated, and it's also actually providing a lot of demand in the market because buyers want to jump in, and as soon as a good home comes up, they're jumping on it and getting after it right away. So we got 3 more quick things to talk about here, but real quick, guys, if you haven't already, make sure to check out the newsletter in the description box down below. You can find some information about that. We send out a weekly newsletter, and there's a ton of really great information that we don't cover here on the channel. So if you want more info about Salt Lake, make sure to check that out, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well. All right, so that being said, let's go ahead and jump into this next item, and I want to talk about the equity in homes and how high it is, right? We've seen home prices run up drastically over the last couple of years, and this has actually added a lot of equity into the pockets of these homeowners, right? You might have somebody who bought a house for $300,000, let's say 5 or 6 years ago, and now that home is worth $500,000 or $550,000. Those people who are sitting on that much equity are in a very safe spot for a number of reasons. Number one, if they ever got into a position where they lost their job and maybe couldn't make their payments, they would be able to tap into their home's equity and be able to withdraw cash in that way. They could also refinance, right? They could do it one of 2 ways, either with a line of credit or a refinance. Or in a worst case scenario, let's say that they lose their job, they can't make their payments anymore, and they have to get out of their home, they could sell it and even drop their price all the way to the bottom of the market and be able to sell that home and still make a profit. So with having so much equity in people's homes, this actually gives a lot of security to the housing market and actually prevents these runs where people are just racing to the bottom, trying to get out of their home, walking away from homes, in a short sale scenario where they owe more than the home is actually worth. This is preventing a lot of that in the market, and that's why we're not seeing foreclosures. That's why we're not seeing short sales or anything like that, because people still have a lot of equity in their home. The next thing I want to talk about is hedge funds buying up real estate across the United States. There's been thousands of homes that have been sold to hedge funds over the last 5 years or so, and they're buying up more every single day. There's a lot of hedge funds out there who are sitting on millions or tens of millions, sometimes even hundreds of millions of dollars of cash waiting to jump in and purchase in the market. They've actually seen that the market has been coming down, and they've been sitting on the sidelines waiting to jump back in, knowing that, hey, home prices are going to come down. We're paying cash, so we're not subject to these interest rates. We're going to see these home prices come down. And as soon as we feel like they've bottomed out, they're going to start buying. They're going to start buying dozens, if not hundreds of homes in specific select markets. Honestly, there's a hedge fund buyer in just about every market out there, at least all the major ones, and they're buying up these homes cash and closing within 2 to 3 weeks, right? So there's a lot of hedge funds out there buying, waiting for prices to drop. And in my opinion, I think this is actually going to provide support for the housing market. We've seen prices come down, but as soon as they start to kind of level off, I think for 2, 3, 4, 5 months at a time, that's when the hedge funds will step back in. They'll say, okay, we think this is going to be a pretty secure market. We think the risk of a recession or a major downturn in housing is limited, and they're going to jump back in, and that could actually cause prices to increase at that point. It's interesting to see this because even though they're buying dozens or even hundreds of homes, they're still only touching just a small percentage of the actual home sales that happen in each market every single month or every single year. Because of that, they actually don't control a huge part of the market, but they do control especially that entry-level starter home, right? They're going to control those homes that are going to rent well and are going to be in C or B class neighborhoods. They're going to control the homes that are selling at that entry-level price point, and this is going to push a lot of first-time home buyers out of the market, which is an unfortunate thing, but will actually keep prices high. So if you're a homeowner, you could actually benefit from this. It's kind of a double-edged sword, right? If you're trying to get into the market, it's going to be very difficult, but if you're already a homeowner, this is actually something that does kind of benefit you. Along with that, I also have to mention that there's a lot of investors in the market, and Airbnb is now a thing, right? If you think back to 15 years ago, Airbnb did not exist. It was not a thing to be renting out your house to complete strangers from the internet, right? However, that is now a thing. Anybody who's bought an Airbnb as an investment property is now seeing that, yes, they can make a lot more money with that Airbnb, but even if they have to reduce that nightly rate that they're charging, they're still going to be turning a profit on many of these properties. If a property is in an area that could be successful with Airbnb, you're also going to see a lot of demand for that. We see that a lot in Park City. We see it in Moab. We see it in St. George. There's these different pockets of communities that have a lot of demand for these short-term rentals, and we see prices remain elevated in those areas because people still want to travel. They're still willing to pay $200, $300, $400 a night for these different places. In some cases, even $1,000 a night or more to stay in these crazy places, right? So there's a lot more Airbnb properties out there, a lot more short-term rentals, and there's also a lot of investors, right? I know that there was a lot of people back in 2005 to 2008 who were investing in real estate, or at least they thought they were, but they weren't really doing that, right? They were kind of just speculating and hoping that they could, make a buck by selling their home for more to the next guy. However, now real estate has kind of become the cool thing to do, right? Everybody and their dog is in real estate now, and it seems like if you're not in real estate, you're falling behind. That just kind of seems, I don't know, maybe I'm too close to it just being in the business, but I'm seeing a lot of investors. I'm seeing a lot of people who want to invest in real estate and own property, right? This is going to be anybody who's owning at least more than one home for investment purposes. So I also think that that's actually going to provide more opportunities and more buyers into the market over the long run, which again, therefore is going to keep the housing market strong or healthy, right? I hesitate to say healthy because I do think that prices are a little bit inflated still, even at this point, but I do think that over the long run, we're going to see real estate continue to climb. We're going to see it continue to increase in price. That's what it's done for the last 300 years here in America, and I think that's also what's going to happen over the next 300 years. So with that being said, guys, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to reach out to me if you want to buy or sell real estate here in Utah. I love helping people from all across the world relocate here, and also people here in my own backyard buy and sell real estate. So reach out to me. My information's here on the screen. And with that being said, we'll catch you guys in the next one.